Well, greetings, everyone. Let me go ahead and start the screen share so we can get started this evening. Hope you all are well. Okay. Well, happy Saturday evening on a week 5. We're going to get ready to start week 6 here. Week 5, we've had very lively discussions and good discussions. Some of the topics here are not, this week anyway, aren't as controversial or emotion charged as some of the discussions we've had in previous weeks, but nonetheless, talking about these topics for week 5, specifically leadership and group behavior, are very important and things that impact you as you move forward in your career, as you study psychology and organizational psychology or even management. I know some of you are studying business. Very important topics as far as I'm concerned in all of these disciplines: business, psychology, leadership, and those kind of things. So we're going to spend most of our time this evening talking about group interaction. Certainly leadership is important, and I think that you've got a lot of good information about leadership from the discussions and the exercises that we're doing this week and what makes a good leader. I'll touch on it just a little bit before I get into the group interaction part of the lecture or presentation tonight. One of the ways to find who is a leader in a group is to get everyone together. Let's say you want to find, if you're an owner of a company and you want to find out who possible, I won't say 100%, but very possible, likely leader or leaders may be in the group that you have. Get a small group together, 12 or maybe 15 people, maybe only 8 people. Give them an exercise that they have to figure out, that they, like a challenge that they have to develop, they have to solve, whether it's developing some kind of a logo or coming up with a slogan, or just using nonverbal communication to solve some kind of a problem, whatever it may be. Give them that task, and they'll obviously think that the task is the logo or the problem that you've given them to solve, but pay close attention to see who the leaders are. That is one way to kind of find out who is going to be a leader, because one, that person will step up. Also, you'll find who is willing to follow that person in the group. You're going to see that some people are going to resist, some people are going to maybe be passive aggressive, but it'll give you some indication of who your leader may be in a particular group. Another thing to look closely at when finding out, or trying to, even if you just casually want to look at a group of people socially, the person who talks the most, even if they're not making sense with what they're saying, the person who talks the most is perceived as the leader. Like, for instance, in jury duty, people who choose juries and people who do jury consulting, I should say, consulting with attorneys to figure out who might be one that the group will follow. The group will perceive the person who talks the most as the leader. They may not like him or her because they may not like what he or she says, but they will perceive that person as the leader. Leadership, at first glance, may seem like not a lot to study, or not a lot to learn, or not a lot we can do, or maybe there's not a lot that we can do to influence that topic. But hopefully this week has shown you that there are things that we can do to develop good leadership. Studying bad leadership, as we've talked about this week from the Kellerman video, is interesting because it's kind of a different approach. She makes a good case why we should study bad leadership. And, she no holds barred with her. Hopefully no one got offended with your political views of what she said. Didn't seem like anybody did, but, she was just approaching it from using examples, I think, of leadership that we all know. If she could have talked about, some leaders in her organizations from the past, but she chose leaders that we at least all know who they were, because they were, leaders of countries and big organizations and things such as that. So, again, I'll just touch a little bit more and touch on bad leadership. Robert Cialdini, I think I probably responded to a couple of your posts with this. Robert Cialdini points out that we learn more from studying bad decisions than we learn from studying good decisions. Something about it in our brain clicks to know what to watch out for, what not to repeat. If everything's going well, we kind of don't learn anything. It's kind of like if no one disagrees, we don't learn anything. So Cialdini makes a point, and a little bit different of a sort of a discipline, if you will, or lecture, if you will, but he makes a good case for that. So let's look into something that definitely impacts each of us. We may or may not get into leadership, may or may not be in leadership. We're going to be impacted by leadership for sure, but maybe quite a bit, maybe not a lot. But group interaction is something that is going to be with us no matter where we are in an organization. So let's look at some things with group interaction here. Okay, first of all, a group is two or more people. So it could be a family, by the way. It could be co-workers. It could be church members. It could be committees in church organizations and congregations, if you will. They just have to see themselves, like two people, passing each other on the street, or two people having a business transaction, say at Starbucks, buying a cup of coffee. They wouldn't necessarily see themselves as a group. If all one person is doing is buying coffee, one person is doing is ringing them up, they wouldn't necessarily see themselves as a group. However, if they meet at Starbucks every day to have coffee, they could be a group. If the customer is a regular and the employee is a regular person there, they could perceive themselves as a group. They may have conversation every day about politics, the weather, business, whatever it may be. So it's very simple. Two or more people, and they must perceive themselves as a group. Oopsie. Okay. So sometimes we purposely join groups, and I'm going to mention a little I'll mention meetup.com in a minute. But people join groups for psychological needs. I've said this many times. I love to teach human relations. We are created by God to have relationships. So one of the ways we have relationships is with groups. So we need affiliation, identification. For instance, like the American Psychological Association is a group. You can certainly join as a student. It's a lot cheaper than what I have to pay to join. And you get a lot of benefits from that. It also is something you can identify. I had a student, former student actually, request to interview me for her graduate class, and she was asking what groups that I belong to. We also join groups for emotional support or assistance or help. You can think of, there's so many groups in America, and I'm going to mention some of them as I get into meetup.com in just a moment. But think of the AARP, which I have resisted joining, even though I qualify for now. I probably should go ahead and send them the $30, whatever it is. But they can provide assistance or help. I can get certain deals or discounts by joining. I get better hotel discounts and things such as that. And then we join for common interests. We also join for situational reasons. For assignment and physical proximity. Sometimes we join a group knowing that it will only be temporary. So, groups, especially work groups or even nonprofit groups, which could be a work group, by the way, for profit or not for profit. These, we want our groups to perform well. When you put together a group as a leader, you put together a group that you want them to achieve their goals. So we look for cohesiveness. Does the group get along? Sometimes we call this collegiality. The structure, do we communicate well as a group? Is there a language barrier or cultural barriers? The group roles, like I said, who's going to be the leader of a particular group? Who is going to be a follower? Who's going to be a passive aggressive in the group, perhaps? What are we going to solve here? The individual dominance. Who's going to allow that to happen? Who's going to take charge? Who's going to, again, this is where the passive aggressive behaviors come into. Maybe the group will perceive one person as the leader clearly, and the other person may think, someone else in the group may think they would be a better leader. And then we have a problem there. And then we have a problem with something called groupthink. Very important concept here. If everyone in the group is of similar culture and background and age and those kind of things, we tend to agree with each other. So the group, could just as well be one person if that's the case. There has to be some people who will challenge what the group is thinking or what the group proposes, because the group is making a decision many times for a larger body. For instance, a group may make a decision for a group of 6 people make a decision for the entire organization of 500 people. Well, the other 494 people may not appreciate that. So it's good to have a representation of different people on the group in various ages, genders, and things such as that. As I said, you want to stay, almost always, you want to stay away from homogeneous groups. You want to go to heterogeneous groups, which is what I was talking about. People of different backgrounds, different educations, different ages, so that they sort of have a different, sort of reference group and things such as that. If people come and leave the group often, it's not as cohesive, obviously. People can feel isolated if we're doing the group remotely, like we are. One of the things that I try very hard to do is let you know that I'm here for you, and try and, even though we're all over the country and could possibly be in other parts of the world. So far, in this group, everyone's in America, in the United States, but conceivably we could have students maybe in the military in Germany or France or in Asia. So we want to make sure that everyone feels like this is a group, like people are included, that there's a culture here. Group size matters. If it's a very, very large group, people may not get to know each other that well. You might have a group of 20 or 25 people, and then you're going to have little cliques, and cliques kind of has a negative connotation. I don't mean it in a negative way now, but people are just going to go to people that are more like themselves. It's just a natural inclination. So if it's a smaller, more intimate group, then you're kind of forced to be with people that aren't necessarily just like you. And sometimes that is better. So as I mentioned, smaller is best for cohesiveness. When you need a lot of different skills, then you might need a larger group. Just here we have the different tasks and task types. You can kind of see bowling teams, car washing, additive, disjunctive, and conjunctive. All right. So like on an assembly line, then we each have our own little job. Hiking, we have our own job. Disjunctive, then we're working together to solve a problem. We're brainstorming. Or in a golf tournament, then we have 4. We're all trying, 4 people on a team typically, and we're all trying to beat the other 4. The other teams of 4, I should say. So I just want to touch a little bit here on group roles. There's task-oriented, social-oriented, and individual, okay? Task-oriented offers new ideas, coordinates activities. Socially oriented encourage cohesiveness, encourages participation, and individual blocking group activities, calling attention to oneself. So if you have a group, perhaps, let me think of a good example for a task-oriented. So maybe we're going to start a business. Maybe let's say, perhaps I have a friend from long ago. He's an attorney, and he had a lot of attorney friends, and they started to do pretty well. And so they decided to get together once a week, I think, like every Tuesday morning. And they had, their goal for that group was to uncover ways that they could invest the money that they made to make more money. Maybe it would be investing in a business or even starting a business. So they would offer up new ideas. They would coordinate the activities of how they're going to go about, who's going to take charge of investigating a particular company, who's going to maybe interview one of the business owners, who's going to investigate their financial stability and things such as that. Social oriented, this could be even, this could also be a business thing. This could be something like in human resources. So it could be where someone from human resources is in charge of, team building in a company, or, in charge of putting together social events for the company. Where I work at an elementary school, we have something called a Sunshine Committee. And, what they do is they periodically try and have employees get together for bowling, an afternoon of bowling, or going out for dinner, or, hors d'oeuvres after work. They have people bring in baby pictures and, put them on a bulletin board, and we guess which baby, whose baby picture that is. So it encourages participation and encourages cohesiveness for the organization. Now, sometimes you get in a group and you have someone who is not wanting to be part of a group. Again, this can go back to that exercise I mentioned in the beginning. They will block group activities, and they will try and call attention to themselves, either in an aggressive manner or even a passive-aggressive manner. One of the problems that I want to draw attention to, because I'm not going to be on here for a long lecture, but one of the problems that we have with working in a group, and you've probably noticed this if you've ever been given an assignment for school, there's a real psychological term called social loafing, and it's I don't want to say it's nobody's fault, because obviously it is, but when you have 2 or 3 or 4 people, you're going to have a certain percentage of those people kind of sit back and let others do the work. I'm sure that you all are aware of this, and my guess is, since you're adult students, you are the ones who end up doing the work, whether this is for school or whether this is for a task at your job. That there will be people who just kind of sit back and, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Or okay, and then they don't really participate, and then sometimes they're even to the point where they're given an assignment. Say if you're going to get together and write a thesis paper, if you will, and each of you break it into chapters, and let's say there's 5 of you. Oftentimes, a person with one chapter just doesn't get back to people. He doesn't return phone calls. He doesn't answer emails. He doesn't answer text messages, or she. And people are begging, and they end up putting it together themselves, or you got one chapter that's very weak. Social loafing is a very real and problematic phenomenon, but there are some things that you can do to help that not be a problem. And unfortunately, it takes holding the other person very accountable, setting up expectations, as well as consequences if that person or those people do not fulfill their obligation. You have to not, sometimes it's kind of like a white elephant in the room. You have to address it and say, call it what it is, and talk about social loafing. I don't want to, people slip into it. It's not that they connive this and have an idea they're going to do this. It's something that people slip into, so it has to be addressed. Okay, and then there's, the group leaders are leaders, but they shouldn't necessarily dominate. the group, they should ideally bring out the best in others. That's what a good leader does. So you don't want to dominate. That's not a good leader. If you're dominating, now sometimes you are going to dominate, but sometimes you want to let someone else dominate or take the lead. Dominate is probably not a good word. So that's part of the problem with a lot of groups. The leader is, like I said, always talking. Those ideas get through. But for all of those times the leader is speaking up, those are times that someone else is not able to. There's also a problem with charisma. People think that a person with a lot of charisma is always a great leader. That's not necessarily true. Someone with charisma can get people to follow them with just total inspiration without having necessarily data to back up their great ideas. So charisma can be a great thing, but it can also be detrimental, and you should be very aware of that as a leader, but also as a follower, if you will. Take, for instance, Hitler. Hitler was charismatic. Jim Jones, who was a cult leader, and I'm sure you know, maybe it's not registering, but you've all heard of Jim Jones in Jonestown down in Guyana, the largest mass suicide ever. He was a very charismatic preacher, quote unquote, and he got people to leave America and follow him down there to create some kind of a commune, and eventually he ended up having his congregates or followers drink poison Kool-Aid. So there's a problem with charisma as much as there is it's esteemed, if you will. So I mentioned groupthink before. So this is some of the factors that lend to groupthink. It's cohesive, like there's no disagreement. Okay, cohesive is good for the most part, but being cohesive should also mean that I can present a differing opinion without anyone getting their feelings hurt. We don't have any groupthink occurs when we're not listening to anything from the outside. We're not listening to any outside influences. Also, we believe we're infallible. Like, we all get our mind right. You see, there's a lot in politics. We often bring up John F. Kennedy's Bay of Pigs in Cuba, the invasion, where the people who thought it was a great idea all were from the same age group, from old white men, and there was no one there sort of to be what's called the devil's advocate, to think what could go wrong. So they thought they were infallible. I don't know if they thought they were morally superior, but that's what happens in groupthink as well. People are under pressure to conform, which is a very real psychological principle also, because people do want to conform. The leader promotes a favorite solution rather than presenting multiple solutions. And also, if there are people who keep information from the members, because groupthink, you want to, and like I said before, you want to consider all the information. Sometimes information is kept out. You want to, look at that information to see if it's worth considering to change the direction of the group. Groups versus individual performance. Interacting groups have higher quality decisions, are more risky. Individuals, nominal groups, are more creative. Maybe they make a decision more quickly as well. So there's pluses and positive things from both of those. Team is very similar. There are some differences. The identification of the team, like what do they stand for, who do we represent. There's interdependence, so that they depend on the group, and the group also depends on them, if you will. There's a negotiation process to help deal with conflicts. It's again, the differences are subtle but important. There are work teams, parallel teams, project teams, management teams. Right down the line, just the different types of teams. Hopefully you read this. This is a little too deep to go into for this presentation, but I do want to point out, teams don't always work. When the team is not a team, you get great examples of these are sports teams. when you have, if you're a sports fan at all, or even if you're not, you can look and read. Some teams just have what they call good chemistry. So there's people are fulfilling, they're fulfilling a needed role. Sometimes it's no one's fault. They just don't have the right sort of players, if you will. You can think of like a 5-man team in basketball, where you have to have a tall person at the center and people that can really shoot from the outside, and forwards who can be good defenders, as well as a center. Well, if you don't have a strong person there, that's not going to be a very good team. If you just can't recruit or can't draft someone to be a center, that's going to be a weak link in your team. That kind of lends itself to lack of skill. And if there's distrust, maybe people think that they are one person on the team is trying to make themselves look better to the boss, and that lends itself to distrust. Conflict is a big part of a group behavior. It's a natural thing, and it's a necessary thing. You don't have conflict when you have groupthink, in other words. So conflict is I always say that conflict is something to be managed, not necessarily resolved. Disputes should be resolved, but conflict should be managed. So what that means is, I should be able to present a different idea, or even think of what might go wrong and present that as, hey, what are we going to do if this happens? What are we going to do if that happens? Like we have to consider the different things. Or couldn't we be better if we, scaled back production and spent more money on research and development? Took those resources, because conflict is a sort of a competition for limited resources, and their resources are always limited. Sometimes there are more resources than other times, but no resource is unlimited. So if I have $1 million that I have access to in this company, I could spend it all on manufacturing, but that might not be the best thing. Yeah, think of all the profit we'll make, but what about when someone comes out with a newer, better product? So we should probably take a certain percentage of that money. I don't know what it'd be, where I'd get the $1 million from either, for that matter. But take part of that $1 million and invest it into research and development. Well, that means, guess what? That we're not going to have as much for production. So that's going to impact our profit. Research and development costs money. So that's how much, so that's a conflict, but we have to figure that out for the long-term success of our organization. Hope that makes sense to you. So yeah, dysfunctional conflict, where people are just trying to undermine each other and they're not really trying to solve problems or trying to create problems. Low morale, absenteeism, stress, turnover, lawsuits, violence even. You unfortunately see more and more of this. Forget about what happened in Las Vegas this week. We have no idea there. God bless those people. But in companies and organizations, we don't necessarily, it's not always someone bringing in a weapon and killing someone, but there is violence. There's fights. There's verbal violence. There is low-level violence as well, but happens all the time. So if the conflict is not addressed and people get their feelings hurt, they're going to act out in some way that is not acceptable. So interpersonal conflict could be just, you don't gel with someone. You don't like what they said, that you feel like they're taking advantage. You don't feel like they're working as hard as they should. It could be the individual against the group, or it could be two groups against each other. For instance, I mentioned manufacturing and research and development. Those two different divisions in a big company, they could have a rivalry. Causes of conflict are many. It is a competition for limited resources, is what I talked about. Jurisdictional ambiguity, like, okay, who's in charge of this? You see this a lot with, I like how they use jurisdictional in this particular PowerPoint, because a lot of times you'll see this with law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies will, is it federal or is it state or is it local? Who has the jurisdiction? This is our arrest. You see it on TV all the time, and that happens. So those are causes of conflict. So With that, I won't keep you on here forever. I know that you're very busy. You got things to do in the course, but I did want to touch base with you. It would have been nice to have some folks on here. Nonetheless, I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you. You know that you can reach out to me. The best way, I say this all the time, is through the message tab in the course room. I check that at least once a day, sometimes several times a day, usually several times a day. And if I get a email, unfortunately, sometimes it gets buried and I don't see it, and I don't want that to happen. I try not to, but you know, in the message tab, I know exactly who it's from, and I get so many emails. I'm sure you do too. And your email name is not something necessarily that I recognize right away. So by all means, you can email me, you can text me, but the best way is in the message tab. It's best for all of us. So our Bible verse, I'll go ahead and give that to you now. Let me think, what would I like to have? Let's see. You know what, let's just do this. The scripture will be one of my favorite Psalms. Most people, I guess if they say, what's your favorite Psalms, many people would choose, probably most would choose the 23rd Psalm. I love it. It's hard for me to pick my favorite Psalm, but we're going to go with Psalms 27. That is the text that will get you the extra credit. If you'd like to, after viewing this, like to shoot me a little message in the message tab, once again, Psalms 27, that will get you your extra credit. So this is our last week coming up. I definitely want to encourage you. Everyone's doing pretty well. Some of you got a few assignments to turn in, some a little more. If you can get those in, I'll do my best. I have a lot of grading to do, but I'll do my best. I know we had a problem with hurricanes in Florida and the Keys and Alabama and even Tennessee for that matter, and Georgia. Obviously in Texas as well. We're still reeling from that. So get those in. I'll be as, I don't say lenient necessarily, but as understanding as possible. But do get those in. I don't want anyone to be held back because of circumstances that were beyond their control. So I appreciate you. Reach out to me. I'm looking forward to this last week together. I'm really going to wrap it up. Of course, we'll meet again next Saturday at the same time. And for our last class live, our final class live of this course. And then, as you know, just a gentle reminder that Sunday at midnight, the course is shut down. You can't get back in there except for your, I think, your message tab. So but you can't submit any work. So that work has to be in there. Nothing I can do about it. I don't shut it down. The college does that. I have no control over it. So if you can get it in before that, then I got, you know, about 2 days to turn the grades in. So it's a lot of grading for me, but if you can get that in, I'll do the best I can. In the meantime, like I said, reach out to me if you need to, and we will see each other in the course room. God bless.